Solid Faith family. I am Shanique, and we are in Leviticus, people. Yesterday, we finished off Exodus, and today we'll be kickstarting in Leviticus. Now, if you're new here, currently we are doing a Bible in a year reading plan, and we're reading from Genesis to Revelation in a year. And I'd love if you would join us. You can find a link to the reading plan that we're currently using in the description box below. All right, so Leviticus. What is Leviticus all about? Who wrote Leviticus? You might be asking. Well, Leviticus was written by Moses. And the key verse that you'll eventually come across as you read Leviticus is Leviticus 20 and verse 26. And it says, "You are to be holy to me, because I, the Lord, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be mine." Now, the book of Leviticus begins precisely where Exodus leaves off. Moses is outside of a tabernacle that has been filled with God's presence, and he's unable to enter. In Leviticus, it breaks from the narrative structure of Genesis and Exodus and moves from storytelling to descriptions of laws and rituals. And I know this is where we all stop reading whenever we read the Bible, right? Leviticus, we're chapters 1 to 7. We are going to read about the sacrificial laws. Now, these laws detail the method and specific instructions for distinct types of sacrifices, which can be divided into two main categories that we'll read about. So you have fellowship offerings, which is essentially gratitude to God, and burnt offerings, which is asking for forgiveness. Okay, so that is a little overview of what Leviticus is about and what we'll be reading about. So today for reading, we have Leviticus 1 to 4 for our reading, and we'll be reading from the New American Standard Bible. So here we go. Leviticus chapter 1. Now the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from a tent of the meeting, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when any one of you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring your offering of livestock from the herd or the flock. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall offer a male without defect. He shall offer it at the doorway of the tent of meeting, so that he may be accepted before the Lord. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, so that it may be accepted for him to make atonement on his behalf. Then he shall slaughter the bull before the Lord, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall offer up the blood and sprinkle the blood around on the altar that is at the doorway of the tent of meeting. He shall then skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces, and the sons of Aaron the priest shall put fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall arrange the pieces with the head and the sweat on the wood which is on the fire that is on the altar. Its entrails, however, and its legs he shall wash with water, and the priest shall offer all of it up in smoke on the altar as a burnt offering, an offering by fire as a soothing aroma to the Lord. But if his offering is from the flock, either from the sheep or from the goats, as a burnt offering he shall offer a male without defect, and he shall slaughter it on the side of the altar northward before the Lord. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle its blood around on the altar. He shall then cut it into pieces with its head and its sweat, and the priest shall arrange them on the wood which is on the fire that is on the altar. The entrails, however, and the legs he shall wash with water, and the priest shall offer all of it and offer it up in smoke on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering by fire of soothing aroma to the Lord. But if his offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, then he shall bring his offering from the turtle doves or from young doves. The priest shall bring it to the altar and pinch off its head and offer it up in smoke on the altar. And its blood is to be drained out on the side of the altar. He shall also remove its craw with its feathers and throw it beside the altar eastward to the place of the fatty ashes. Then he shall tear it by his wings, but shall not sever it. And the priest shall offer it up in smoke on the altar, on the wood which is on the fire. It is a burnt offering, an offering by fire of soothing aroma to the Lord. I hope you're still reading with me. And women, no, we're not talking about the burnt offering that you give your husbands. No, this is something totally different. Leviticus chapter 2, the law of the grain offerings. Now, when everyone presents a grain offering as an offering to the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil on it and put frankincense on it. He shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priest, and he shall take from his handful of its fine flour and of its oil with all of its frankincense. And the priest shall offer it up in smoke as its memorial portion on the altar, an offering by fire of a soothing aroma to the Lord. The remainder of the grain offering belongs to Aaron and his sons, a most holy part of the offerings to the Lord by fire. Now, when you bring an offering of grain offering baked in an oven, it shall be unleavened cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, or unleavened wafers spread with oil. And if your offering is a grain offering made on the griddle, it shall be of fine flour, unleavened, mixed with oil. You shall break it into bits and pour oil on it. It is a grain offering. Now, if your offering is a grain offering made in a pan, it shall be made of fine flour with oil. When you bring in the grain offering, which is made of these things to the Lord, it shall be presented to the priest, and he shall bring it to the altar. The priest then shall take up from the grain offering its memorial portion, and shall offer it up in smoke on the altar as an offering by fire of a soothing aroma to the Lord. The remainder of the grain offering belongs to Aaron and his sons, a most holy part of the offerings to the Lord by fire. No grain offering which you bring to the Lord shall be made with leaven, for you shall not offer up in smoke any leaven or any honey as an offering by fire to the Lord. As an offering of first fruits you shall bring them to the Lord, but they shall not ascend as a soothing aroma on the altar. Every grain offering of yours, moreover, you shall season with salt, so that the salt of the covenant of your God will not be lacking from your grain offering. With all your offerings you shall offer salt. And if you bring a grain offering of early ripened things to the Lord, you shall bring fresh heads of grain roasted in the fire and crushed grain of new growth for the grain offering of your early ripened produce. You shall then put oil on it and place incense on it. It is a grain offering. Then the priest shall offer up in smoke its memorial portion, part of its crushed grain and its oil with all its incense as an offering by fire to the Lord. I hope you're still with me, folks. Stick with me, stick with me. This year we are reading the Bible in a year. We are moving on to Leviticus chapter 3. Now, if his offering is a sacrifice of peace offerings, if he is going to offer from the herd, whether male or female, he shall offer it without defect before the Lord. And he shall lay his hand on the head of his offering and slaughter it at the doorway of the tent of meeting. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle the blood around the altar. From the sacrifice of the peace offering, he shall then present an offering by fire to the Lord, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the two kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's sons shall offer it up in smoke on the altar on the burnt offering, which is on the wood that is on the fire. It is an offering by fire for soothing aroma to the Lord. But if his offering for a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord is from the flock, he shall offer it, male or female without defect. If he is going to offer a lamb for his offering, then he shall offer it before the Lord. And he shall lay his hand on the head of his offering and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. And Aaron's son shall sprinkle its blood around the altar. From the sacrifice of peace offerings he shall then bring as an offering by fire to the Lord its fat, the entire fat tail, which he shall remove close to the backbone. the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the two kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys. Then the priest shall offer it up in smoke on the altar as food, an offering by fire to the Lord. Now, if his offering is a goat, then he shall offer it before the Lord, and he shall lay his hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting, and the sons of Aaron shall sprinkle its blood around the altar. From it he shall present his offering as an offering by fire to the Lord. The fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the two kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys. The priest shall offer them up in smoke on the altar as food, an offering by fire, as a soothing aroma. All fat is the Lord's. It is a permanent statute throughout your generations in all your dwelling places. You shall not eat any fat or any blood. Stick with me, folks. Stick with me. We just got one more chapter. If you need to, just hit pause, grab yourself a glass of water, and come on back as we dive into Leviticus chapter 4. If you're not yet subscribed, I encourage you just to hit that notification bell and subscribe so you'll be notified whenever we release a new video. All right, Leviticus chapter 4, the law of sin offerings. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if a person sins unintentionally in any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and commits any of them, if the anointed priest sins so as to bring guilt on the people, then he is to offer to the Lord a bull without defect as a sin offering for his sin which he has committed. He shall bring the bull to the doorway of the tent of the meeting before the Lord, and he shall lay his hand on the head of the bull and slaughter the bull before the Lord. Then the anointed priest is to take some of the blood of the bull and bring it to the tent of meeting. And the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before the Lord, in front of the veil of the sanctuary. The priest shall also put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense, which is before the Lord, in the tent of meeting. And all the rest of the blood of the bull he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the doorway of the tent of meeting. And he shall remove from it all the fat of the bull of the sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat which is on the entrails, and the two kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys, just as it is removed from the ox of a sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest is to offer them up in smoke on the altar of burnt offering. But the hide of the bull and all its flesh, along with its head, its legs, its entrails, and its refuse, that is all the rest of the bull. He is to bring out to a clean place outside the camp where the fatty ashes are poured out, and burn it on wood with fire. Where the fatty ashes are poured out, it shall be burnt. Now, if the entire congregation of Israel does wrong unintentionally, and the matter escapes the notice of the assembly, and they commit any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and they become guilty, when the sin which they have committed becomes known, then the assembly shall offer a bull of the herd as a sin offering, and bring it in front of a tent of meeting. Then the elders of the congregation shall lay their hands on the head of the bull before the Lord, and the bull shall be slaughtered before the Lord. Then the anointed priest is to bring some of the blood of the bull to the tent of meeting, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil. He shall then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar which is before the Lord, in the tent of meeting, and all the rest of the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offerings, which is at the doorway of the tent of meeting. And he shall remove all its fat from it, and offer it up in the smoke on the altar. He shall also do with the bull just as he did with the bull of the sin offering. He shall do the same with it. So the priest shall make atonement for them, and they will be forgiven. Then he is to bring the bull out to a place outside the camp and burn it just as he burned the first bull. It is a sin offering for the assembly. When a leader sins and unintentionally does any of the things which the Lord his God has commanded not to be done, and he becomes guilty, if his sin which he has committed is made known to him, he shall bring as his offering a goat, a male without defect. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the male goat and slaughter it in place where they slaughter the burnt offering before the Lord. It is a sin offering. Then the priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering. And he shall offer all its fat up in smoke on the altar, as in the case of the fat of the sacrifice of peace offerings. So the priest shall make atonement for him regarding his sin, and he will be forgiven. Amen. Now, if any one of the common people sins unintentionally by doing any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done and becomes guilty, if his sin which he has committed is made known to him, then he shall bring as his offering a goat, a female without defect, for his sin which he has committed. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter the sin offering at the place of the burnt offering. The priest shall then take some of its blood with its finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and all the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. Then he shall remove all its fat, just as the fat was removed from the sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall offer it up in smoke on the altar as a soothing aroma to the Lord. So the priest shall make atonement for him, and he will be forgiven. But if he brings a lamb as his offering for a sin offering, he shall bring a female without defect, and he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it as a sin offering in the place where they slaughter the burnt offering. And the priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. And all the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. Then he shall remove all its fat, just as the fat of the lamb is removed from the sacrifice of the peace offerings. And the priest shall offer it up in smoke on the altar, on the offerings by fire to the Lord. So the priest shall make atonement for him regarding his sin which he has committed, and he will be forgiven. Okay, that is our reading for today. Can I just get an amen? Aren't you thankful? Aren't you thankful that Jesus came and died for us? That way, there's no more slaughtering of animals. There's no more bloodshed like this. You might be wondering, all these sacrifices, why? Why? The book of Leviticus starts right where Exodus left off in the tabernacle. The Lord speaks to Moses from the dwelling place, which is something we'll see throughout the book. Now, in this book, we will learn about the law, sacrifice, and the holiness that God requires. However, in all of this, we'll also see that this book constantly points us to Jesus. These first chapters gives instructions for sacrifice, and we learn the sacrifice must be without blemish, and that the sacrifice is a pleasing aroma to the Lord. We're also introduced to the concept of atonement. Now, the sacrificial system was an essential element of the Mosaic covenant because it was impossible to live up to the requirements of the law. No one could perfectly obey the law, and sin had to be dealt with through sacrifice. So each commanded sacrifice was significant, and they all pointed to the perfect sacrifice, Jesus, who would offer by his crucifixion on the cross. Now, this was not the beginning of God's sacrificial system. Adam knew of sacrifice, as did Cain and Abel. Now, the idea of sacrifice to the gods, it was not unique to Israel. Other nations and cultures practiced sacrifice, although these often ultimately involved human sacrifice in those instances. Now, because sacrifice was already known to Israel, these instructions to the priests were not particularly new. However, they were mostly a clarification of a foundation that was already known to Israel through the traditions of their fathers. All right, that is it for today. Leviticus chapter 1 to 4. Thank you so much for joining us with our Bible in a Year reading plan, and we'll see you tomorrow.